It was the fall of 2009, and at the time, I was 16 years old. I lived in the central part of North Carolina. Nowadays, the cities are loaded with things to do for Halloween season, but back then, the best form of entertainment I could come up with was to visit the Devil's Tramping Ground with a few friends. The Devil's Tramping Ground is a local legend. It sits right outside of Sellers City, North Carolina, about an hour away from where I live, and I had just gotten my license, so why not? For those of you unfamiliar with the locale or its legend, the Devil's Tramping Ground is a perfect circular spot of dead soil in the middle of the woods. Despite the greenery around it, nothing grows in that circle. The legend says that if you drop or leave anything in the circle, it is moved and or disappears by morning, as the devil supposedly comes here to plot his evil doings against humanity late at night, pacing in a circle as he thinks. That's the gist, but feel free to do a little research if you're interested. It's a decent read. Sellers City is a sticks and barns town with long, barren roads that seemingly translate to "don't stop until you get the hell out of here." It was on one such road where I began to feel uneasy. Rural areas always have that heavy Twilight Zone energy, and the road that we were on, conveniently titled Devil's Tramping Ground Road, was completely lacking streetlights. The only thing illuminating the overworked asphalts was the fading yellow headlights of my 2002 Mercury Cougar and the useless glow of a crescent moon. In those dim lights, we began to see plattered graffiti on the road leading up to the location. Creepy things I didn't expect, but never really would have understood the impact of until I saw them. In white paint, the road was decorated in crude warnings. The one that I remember the most was, "The devil lives here," and a huge white cross in front of an opening in the forest. I parked on the side of the road. The grounds was immediately not as creepy as I expected. It was not too deep into the woods. In fact, the clearing could be made out from the road, not as menacing as I had imagined. Maybe it was the empty beer cans or red Solo cups lying all around. Obviously, people partied there. Or maybe it was the jokes my friend and I started making almost immediately that calmed my nerves. But it was 2-something in the morning. We decided to catch Lucifer right on his hour, and I remember feeling less on edge than I was on the road. My flashlight would get eaten through the trees if I moved it upwards, so I focused its beams on the soil, truly more interesting in finding signs of the paranormal than my friends were. It was 4 of us total. 2 of my friends went back to the car after a while. It was cold, and there was not much to see. I stayed back with a buddy of mine. I brought a Ziploc bag with me, along with a pocket Bible, a rosary in my pocket, just in case, and a stuffed rabbit that one of my best friends had given me. Before leaving, I scooped some dirt up and added it to the Ziploc. I found the prospect of dead soil so interesting, and figured that maybe studying it under proper light compared to other soil would give me a better idea of what happened here. Alien radiation? Climate change? Sulfur? Maybe the devil was just busy that night. In between jokes and complaining about the cold, we heard someone walking into the depth of the woods. This wasn't a mistaken sound. This wasn't an, "I think someone's walking in the woods." This was a definite sound and a definite feeling. This was deep behind the brush between the trees, and these footsteps were heavy and unashamed of being heard. This was the first time that I noticed no crickets were in these woods. There was no sound other than us and those steps, and I was even more unwilling to lift my little flashlight, which was tucked under my armpit and pointed towards the soil sample. My eyes didn't need adjusting, and so we stood there as I made out the shape of something in these woods. It was dark, but I could see it. It was tall, but not disgustingly tall. It was human-shaped. It stood on 2 feet. It would walk and stop, then walk, and then stop. Toward us, I think. We were petrified. Neither my friend or I moved. I don't even think we breathed. I was so overcome with fear that I felt numb, but a little tremble ran through my entire body. We just stared. Later we would discuss how we both wondered if it had seen us, and talk about how we didn't want to move in case it hadn't. At this future time, we would also discuss the smell. It was an awful, putrid scent, burning feces and rotting eggs and rotten meat. I grew up Catholic, hence the Bible and rosary, and I've always been told that smell means the devil is around. That didn't help my case then. Even typing that now, I'm slightly trembling. This thing stayed, toying with us amongst the sticks of the forest. I say sticks because at the time, very little greenery was alive. I was certain at one point that it saw me. I had that sixth sense feeling that I was being stared right back, and suddenly, I had a feeling of overwhelming, unbearable despair. I realized then that my friend had been clutching the back of the collar of my shirt. I think I was so paralyzed with fear that I had ceased to feel anything but that numbness. I wasn't even cold anymore, but when I felt my friend's hand, I dropped everything in my arms and stood up, then hauled ass back to the car, not running, just very hurried. I was sure my friend was behind me, but between us, and in all honesty, I didn't even think about it at the time. I was just ready to go. I was so ready to go, in fact, that I missed the clear path completely and took off in between the trees and brush, heading towards the yellow glow of the headlights. It wasn't an incredibly long trek, like I said before. The road was right there, but it felt awful and long to me, and it was enough for those tiny branches to leave little scrapes and even some cuts down my hands, cheeks, and neck. This whole ordeal can't have lasted too long. When I got back to my car, the keys were already in the ignition. The other two friends had the heat on. They both asked me what happened. The friend who stayed behind with me got in the passenger seat soon after, and we took off. Our other friends, the ones who had been in the car, pointed out that our eyes were swollen and bright red. I think we'd been crying, or at least it looked like we had been. I looked in the rearview mirror. My pupils were abnormally dilated. My eyelids were puffy and tender and red. Keep in mind, this could all have some form of explanation. Maybe the fear made us cry without knowing. Maybe the darkness combined with our nervous reactions enlarged our pupils. But it was still very odd. I realized long after that I had left my Bible, my stuffed rabbit, and my Ziploc bag of dirt in the circle. I considered going back the next day in broad daylight, but I haven't been back there since. I still wonder and worry about who has my stuff. I grew up in central Indiana in the 9-county region. My parents had kids before they were ready, and it resulted in us not having much money growing up. My parents struggled to make ends meet, and it resulted in my grandparents raising me for large portions of the day so that my parents could work. My grandparents' home had a storied past. It was built in the mid-1800s prior to the onset of the Civil War. Supposedly, the first owner was a stop on the Underground Railroad, and this resulted in the house having false walls that opened up to small enclosed areas. It was bizarre, and my friends thought it was the coolest thing to have these tiny passages throughout the house. My father actually grew up in the place too. It was a 2-story single-family dwelling with an attic and a basement. Growing up, my father and grandfather would crack jokes about Mr. Cooper. I didn't know anyone by that name, and when asked, my father would always say that the guy was just the previous owner of the home. I didn't think much of it at the time. I just knew that my father wasn't overly fond of the second floor of the home. I wouldn't take anything upstairs to the second floor unless the sun was out. Again, I was a child, thought nothing of this, as I only stayed on the first floor anyway. My grandparents died when I was a child and left the home to my father because of his financial issues at the time. There were 3 bedrooms at the top of the stairs with a staircase leading down to the first level. My brother and I were forced to share one of these rooms because the middle bedroom had been converted into a junk room over time by my grandparents. They were born prior to the onset of the Great Depression and rationing in World War II. As a result, they kept everything and just stored it in this one room. The door was hard to open because of the amount of junk in there, and it was stacked so densely that there wasn't really anywhere to walk. If you've ever seen an episode of Hoarders, that one room looked like that, just without the dead animals and decaying food. My sister had the third bedroom to herself, which we referred to as the blue room because the walls were painted blue. My grandmother seemed to dread that particular room, but I thought nothing of it at the time. My bedroom and the blue room were the locations of the only two false walls that I knew about. Both of the closets had a wall that required a minimal amount of force to expose a smaller closet on the other side. Because my grandmother died when I was a child, I never thought to ask why she hated that room. I know why she hated it now. It only took a year to find out. On Christmas Eve in 2001, I was sleeping in the blue room with my brother and sister. The house predated central heating and cooling. Instead, the house had a fireplace that heated the entire house through a network of pipes that fed the smoke through a couple of chimneys. We also depended on window-mounted air conditioners to cool the house in each room. These were the same units my grandparents bought, with analog dials to set temperatures that made a click sound every time you turned it. As such, we tended to congregate to whichever room was cooler or hotter to sleep in. On that particular night, it was the blue room. On that night, I was woken by the bedroom door slipping open and opening slightly. We had pets, so my assumption was that one of the animals wanted to warm up too. As I attempted to go to sleep, I heard the air conditioner come on and the clicking of the temperature dials. I sat up to look over at the machine and saw nothing there, just the dials turning back and forth. I yelled for my sister to get up, and the dial suddenly stopped. At that moment, the door just shut the rest of the way on its own. My brother was still sound asleep, but my sister and I sat there terrified. We had to yell for our parents to turn on the stairway light, which was on the other side of that door, before either of us would leave. Needless to say, I never slept in that room again. Flash forward a couple of years to somewhere in 2003 or 2004. My dad works his tail off to get a high-paying position that results in us doing some renovations to the house, including my bedroom. In that time, the only unusual activity I'd ever heard was footsteps upstairs once in a while during the night, and periods where I felt like I was being watched or I wasn't alone, despite knowing that no one else was there. Because of the renovations, the curtain rods had not yet been installed on my bedroom windows. The only bedroom windows that I had faced a country road that ran just in front of the house, which resulted in any car going by having its headlights flood my bedroom with light. It was late that night, and I woke up to a scratching sound coming from the wall behind my bed. The sound was so loud that my brother woke up too. This wasn't especially odd, as we had some vermin get into the walls during the renovations, and we're still in the process of getting them out. However, it didn't stop at scratching. What was scratching turned into what sounded like finger tapping on the wall, and then full-blown knocking. To this day, I believe those sounds came from that hidden room. My brother and I shot up out of bed as soon as we heard the knocking, and were grabbing our stuff to leave. At that moment, I immediately got the feeling that we weren't alone again. A passing car suddenly filled the room with light, and because of the physics of the light coming from a passing car, it basically provided light to the room in stages, and then faded out. As the light began to fade, my brother and I saw a dark humanoid figure standing by the window. It didn't have any features at all. I just remember it being a figure, and it was gone once all of the light was gone from the room. My brother and I then dashed out of the room screaming. From that point on, we refused to sleep up there at all and slept downstairs in the living room. Quite frankly, I didn't want to go up there for anything anymore. Flash forward again to 2010. I don't go up there for anything beyond clothes and, like my father, will only go as long as the sun is out. The unexplained footsteps still happen once in a while, but nothing prepared me for what was going to happen on one particular night. I had already been a couple of years into college at this point, and went to an out-of-state university just to get away from the place. My brother was going through some mental health stuff at the time, and destroy the door at the bottom of the staircase leading upstairs by tearing it off its hinges. My father just left it in the stairwell to fix it later, but never got around to the later. I was sleeping on the couch in the downstairs living room where I had been sleeping since that incident in 2004. My brother and sister were out with friends, and my parents had gone on a date night, leaving me alone with the animals. I woke up to my cats hissing at what I assumed was one another, but on closer inspection, appeared to be the dining room where that doorway to the staircase was at. Suddenly, I heard a series of footsteps in the junk room directly above the living room where I was. I was caught off guard because, again, there wasn't anywhere to walk in that room. I then heard the creaking of the door leading to the junk room, which again made no sense. The door opens heading into the room, and there was so much crap in there that my father couldn't bear to part with after the death of his parents that you couldn't open it easily. I was already getting up to head out to the dining room because the front door to the house was there. I had no intention of staying in that place by myself with Mr. Cooper. Suddenly, those footsteps sounded like they were jogging down the stairs to come into the dining room with me. As they got louder, I realized that they were getting closer to ground level, and I made a beeline for the front door. Just as I was leaving, I heard the sound of a crash as the broken door flew across the room into a cabinet that smashed one of its glass walls. The footsteps were so loud that I could hear them darting back up the stairs. I drove away from the area to a department store a few miles away and told my parents to meet me there. I refused to ever go back in that home alone. Thankfully, once I got back to college again, my parents informed me that my father had a new job across the country and I wouldn't have to go back. I don't know what Mr. Cooper is, but the house was ultimately torn down. We couldn't sell it because nobody wanted it. The person who ultimately bought it wanted it exclusively for the land and not the structures on it. It was to their benefit. I couldn't imagine putting anyone else through what I saw, and I don't know that my parents would have been forthright over it out of fear to scare the buyers away. In any case, I'd say that Mr. Cooper got what he wanted because we all left, but he's homeless now. This is something I experienced dozens of times while sharing a house with my roommate back in the late 90s, 1997 to 99 to be precise. There were multiple times where I would wake up from a sound sleep because I felt like I was being watched or that there was a presence in the room with me. When I opened my eyes, I would see matte black spheres the size of a volleyball, very slowly moving along the edge of where the walls of my room joined the ceiling. There were usually 3 to 4 of these at once, spaced out evenly around the room. When they would reach a corner, they would abruptly turn 90 degrees to continue along the edge of the wall and ceiling. They never moved lower or varied from their path. Think Pac-Man. No sound, no smells, no light, or any other description I can give you. The first few nights I saw this, I thought they were floaters in my eyes, so I would rub them and nope, still there. A few times I jumped out of bed and flipped the lights on. They were gone. Flipped the lights off again and boom, there they are again, still moving slowly around the room. I've never experienced anything before or since like this. I have a sneaking suspicion it has something to do with that house, or maybe just that room. The guy that rented that room prior to me was good friends with my roommate Paul, who I'm still best friends with to this day. And Paul told me when I moved in that Chip, the guy who lived here before you, used to complain to me about seeing strange things in this room. Hopefully you don't mind. I'm very open-minded, so of course I welcomed any high strangeness. Strangely enough, I told a friend of mine about this a few years back, and he turned stark white and said to me, "Are you serious, dude? Because I used to see the exact same thing in my room in Venezuela as a teenager." Maybe it's some sort of minor brain seizure or walking hallucination. To this day, I still wonder about it.